I'm Diana Morgan, 35 years old, standing in my parents' lush backyard in Boston while the smell of charcoal and judgment fills the air. You're 35. Still lost, Mom whispered harshly, champagne sloshing in her glass as family members pretended not to listen. My sister Abigail's perfectly glossed lips curled into a smirk. I've got an interview with Nexus Solutions tomorrow, she announced proudly, eyes darting to gauge my reaction. I smiled quietly, savoring the secret knowledge only I possessed. Tomorrow, she'll walk into that interview and discover I'm the CEO of Nexus. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to see how my family's perception of failure was about to be completely shattered. Growing up as the Morgan family's different daughter meant constantly swimming against the current of expectations in our upper-middle-class household nestled in a respectable Boston suburb. From elementary school onward, I questioned the well-worn paths my parents considered non-negotiable, while my sister Abigail excelled at following their blueprint for success with military precision. Martha and Robert Morgan built their identities around impressive credentials and conventional achievements. Dad graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law before joining a prestigious firm, while Mom leveraged her Yale MBA into a banking career she reluctantly paused to raise successful children. They viewed life as a series of predictable stepping stones: elite college, advanced degree, respected profession, timely marriage, well-behaved children, comfortable retirement. This philosophy transformed Abigail into their crowning achievement: class valedictorian, Cornell graduate, and relentless collector of accolades that adorned our family room walls like trophies of parental victory. Meanwhile, my early entrepreneurial ventures were dismissed as concerning evidence of an unfocused personality. The lemonade stand I expanded into 3 neighborhood locations at age 9, the custom friendship bracelet business that funded my first computer at 12, the website design service I launched for local businesses while still in high school. Diana has potential if she would just apply herself properly, became my parents' standard explanation at family gatherings, delivered with tight smiles and furrowed brows. The breaking point arrived during my second year of law school, a path I'd chosen primarily to placate my parents, when I discovered a technological solution to a document processing problem that lawyers had been struggling with for decades. The programming skills I taught myself during late nights after classes suddenly crystallized into a business concept that made my heart race with excitement and possibility. When I announced my decision to leave law school and pursue this vision, my parents didn't just disapprove. They orchestrated a full-scale family intervention in our living room, with Abigail sitting primly beside them as the exemplar of good choices. "This is throwing your life away," Dad declared, his voice escalating with each word. "No Morgan has ever dropped out of anything." Mom nodded vigorously, adding, "What about financial security? Respect? Your future family?" Abigail remained silent, but her expression spoke volumes, a mixture of secondhand embarrassment and barely concealed satisfaction at being, once again, the daughter who wouldn't cause such disappointment. That evening marked the beginning of my gradual separation from family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and Sunday dinners, not through dramatic declaration, but through the natural drift that occurs when fundamental values no longer align. While they expected me to come to my senses within months, I instead poured every waking hour into building Nexus Solutions from nothing, surviving on ramen noodles and determination during those early years when failure seemed far more likely than success. The distance between us grew proportionally to my company's growth, though they remained unaware of either trajectory. I made a deliberate choice to operate under my mother's maiden name professionally, ensuring that casual Google searches of Diana Morgan wouldn't reveal my mounting accomplishments in the tech industry. For 7 years, I constructed a life and company separate from their knowledge or approval, watching from afar as they continued celebrating Abigail's adherence to their prescribed path, her law school graduation, her engagement to a suitable banker, her purchase of a home in the right neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they worried about my ability to support myself, I was quietly building a company valued at over $300 million, employing hundreds of people and revolutionizing legal document processing across the country. Their perception of me remained frozen in time, the disappointing daughter who couldn't follow simple instructions for success. I occasionally caught glimpses of their lives through holiday cards and distant social media connections, noting how Abigail's seemingly perfect trajectory had become their primary source of parental pride and validation. What they couldn't see, what no one in my family could see, was that their lost daughter had actually found exactly what she needed by walking away from their narrow definition of achievement. The annual Morgan family barbecue tradition began promptly at 3 o'clock on the last Saturday of June, a ritual as predictable as my mother's passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. This particular gathering marked my first appearance at a family function in nearly 8 months, a decision prompted more by curiosity than nostalgia after receiving my mother's text that mentioned Abigail had exciting career news to share. I arrived intentionally 10 minutes late, parking my modest Toyota several blocks away instead of the sleek Tesla that actually belonged to me, another calculated choice to maintain the facade they expected. The familiar scent of my father's carefully guarded barbecue sauce recipe permeated the air as I navigated through the immaculately landscaped backyard where approximately 20 relatives had already assembled, each clutching drinks and assumptions in equal measure. My Aunt Caroline spotted me first, her eyebrows lifting slightly before she composed her features into what I recognized as her supportive smile, reserved for family members experiencing difficulties. "Diana, what a lovely surprise to see you here," she exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm, air-kissing both my cheeks while discreetly assessing my clearance rack sundress, another conscious choice for the occasion. "We were just talking about Tyler's new position at Massachusetts General," she continued, gesturing toward my cousin who stood proudly recounting some surgical procedure to an attentive audience of relatives. Tyler acknowledged me with a quick nod before continuing his story, apparently too engrossed in medical heroics to properly greet the family disappointment. My father manned the grill with characteristic precision, spatula in one hand and timer in the other, his engineer's mind never quite able to accept barbecuing as an art rather than a science. 18 minutes each side, never more, it was explaining to my Uncle Paul, who nodded with the resigned expression of someone who had heard this lecture annually for decades. Dad's eyes met mine briefly, his greeting a terse "Diana," accompanied by a tight-lipped attempt at a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mom emerged from the kitchen balancing a tray of her signature deviled eggs, her face momentarily registering surprise at my presence before quickly rearranging itself into hostess mode. "Diana, I wasn't sure you'd make it," she called out code for "I assumed you wouldn't bother showing up as usual." Before I could respond, Uncle James materialized beside me, drink already half empty and inhibitions lowered accordingly. "So, kiddo, what are you doing with yourself these days? Still figuring things out?" The familiar question hung in the air like the mosquitoes that inevitably appeared as afternoon transitioned to evening. I offered my standard vague response about working in tech, a truthful yet deliberately understated description that family members typically interpreted as answering phones at a call center or perhaps data entry if they were feeling generous in their assumptions. "Tech, huh? Good field if you can get established," Uncle James replied with thinly veiled skepticism before launching into an unsolicited explanation of how his financial planning business had helped clients retire comfortably for 40 years. The afternoon progressed predictably. Conversations about mortgages, private schools, vacation properties, and retirement portfolios dominated as I drifted between groups, offering non-committal responses when directly addressed while observing the familiar family dynamics with anthropological detachment. Cousin Jennifer proudly displayed ultrasound images of her third child. Aunt Patricia detailed her recent Mediterranean cruise with meticulous attention to the square footage of her suite, and my father's brother Douglas subtly mentioned the new Mercedes parked in my parents' driveway 3 separate times during appetizers alone. The collective attention shifted dramatically when my mother clinked her glass as everyone gathered around the elaborately arranged dining table on the stone patio. "Before we eat, Abigail has some wonderful news to share," she announced, her voice carrying that distinctive note of maternal pride reserved exclusively for my sister's achievements. Abigail rose gracefully, her designer sundress and perfectly highlighted hair capturing the golden hour sunlight like a character from a Nancy Meyers film. I'm thrilled to announce that after months of networking and preparation, I've secured an interview with Nexus Solutions, she proclaimed, pausing dramatically to allow appropriate gasps and murmurs. It's an executive position in their legal department, and according to my contact there, they're very impressed with my background. The collective family reaction suggested she'd announced a guaranteed Nobel Prize rather than merely an interview, with congratulatory exclamations and knowing nods exchanged across the table. Nexus is absolutely disrupting the entire legal technology sector, my father announced authoritatively, despite having never mentioned the company in my presence before. Their valuation jumped 80% last year alone. My mother beamed while squeezing Abigail's shoulder affectionately, adding, "They only interview the very top candidates. Less than 2% of applicants even get a call back." The irony of hearing my own company's statistics quoted back to me nearly caused an involuntary laugh to escape, which I quickly disguised as a cough. Mom's gaze shifted from Abigail to me, her expression transforming from radiant pride to thinly disguised disappointment in the space of seconds. "Why can't you be focused like your sister, Diana? At 35, you should have found your path by now." The table fell momentarily silent, that uncomfortable quiet that descends when someone speaks aloud what others think but know better than to say. Abigail filled the awkward pause with practiced diplomacy. "I'm sure Diana is doing fine in her own way," delivering the statement with such condescension that it sounded more insulting than silence would have been. This opened the floodgates for a family-wide assessment of my perceived shortcomings, thinly veiled as concern. Aunt Patricia wondered aloud if I'd considered administrative work at a stable company with good benefits. Uncle James suggested it wasn't too late to consider community college for an associate's degree in something practical, and Cousin Tyler helpfully noted that the hospital cafeteria was hiring cashiers with very reasonable hours and employee discounts. Throughout this public dissection of my apparent failures, I maintained a slight smile, allowing their assumptions to wash over me while mentally reviewing the quarterly projections meeting I'd be leading Monday morning for a company none of them realized I had built from nothing. As the conversation eventually drifted to other topics and family members dispersed into smaller conversational clusters, I made the quiet decision that tomorrow, after Abigail's interview, would finally be the day when perceptions and reality collided. The distance between my family's perception and my reality began the day I walked out of law school carrying nothing but a backpack containing an old laptop and a notebook filled with algorithm sketches. My one-bedroom apartment in Somerville became Nexus Solutions' first headquarters, with a second-hand desk wedged between my bed and the sole window that provided natural light from a narrow air shaft. Those early months tested every ounce of conviction I possessed, especially when the first round of potential investors dismissed my business plan with barely concealed patronizing smiles. Interesting concept, but perhaps too ambitious for someone without technical credentials, one venture capitalist commented while glancing at his watch, clearly having allocated the minimum courtesy time for our meeting. Another suggested I find a technical co-founder, preferably someone with an engineering background from MIT or Stanford, implying without saying directly that my self-taught programming skills couldn't possibly be sufficient for such an undertaking. The rejections accumulated alongside my dwindling savings, leading to nights when instant noodles constituted both lunch and dinner as I coded until my vision blurred. The pivotal turning point arrived unexpectedly through a chance encounter at a small legal tech meetup in Cambridge, where I presented a rudimentary prototype of my document processing system. Among the sparse audience sat Rebecca Winters, a former tech executive who had recently sold her cybersecurity company and was exploring new investment opportunities. Unlike previous potential investors, Rebecca asked technical questions that delved into the core functionality of my algorithm rather than fixating on my unconventional background or lack of Ivy League computer science degree. "The approach you're taking to natural language processing for legal documents is genuinely innovative," she remarked after my presentation, handing me her business card with private contact information handwritten on the back. "Call me tomorrow. I'd like to discuss this further." That conversation led to Nexus Solutions' first seed funding, $300,000 in exchange for 15% equity, accompanied by Rebecca's invaluable mentorship and industry connections. With actual capital available, I upgraded from my apartment office to a small commercial space in Kendall Square, hired 2 junior developers, and accelerated the development timeline for our core product. The breakthrough that transformed our trajectory came during a caffeine-fueled 48-hour coding marathon when I finally perfected the proprietary algorithm that could interpret, categorize, and extract critical information from legal documents with unprecedented accuracy. The system could analyze thousands of pages of contracts, depositions, and case law in minutes rather than the days or weeks required by teams of paralegals and junior associates, all while maintaining higher accuracy rates than manual review. Securing our first major client required persistence bordering on stubbornness, with dozens of law firms politely declining demonstrations before Hamilton and Associates, a mid-sized practice specializing in corporate mergers, agreed to pilot our system for a complex acquisition case. Their senior partner's skeptical expression transformed into stunned disbelief when our software completed in 30 minutes what would have required his team approximately 3 weeks of manual document review. "This changes everything about how we approach due diligence," he admitted, immediately authorizing a full subscription to our platform and subsequently becoming our most vocal advocate within legal circles. While the company steadily grew, I maintained a deliberate separation between my professional achievements and my family relationships. Operating professionally as Diana Winters, borrowing my mentor's surname, provided a convenient shield that prevented casual connections between the increasingly visible CEO of Nexus Solutions and the Morgan family's underachieving daughter. The strategic decision to maintain this divided identity stemmed not from shame, but from a desire to succeed entirely on my own merits, without either the advantage or the burden of family connections. The 18-hour workdays during those formative years left little time for family gatherings anyway, making it relatively easy to maintain the illusion that I was simply figuring things out rather than revolutionizing an industry. Particularly satisfying milestones passed entirely without my family's knowledge. Our expansion to offices in New York and Chicago, the Forbes 30 Under 35 recognition, our Series B funding round that valued the company at $70 million, and the steady growth of our team from 3 people to nearly 50 employees within 3 years. The most transformative business development occurred during our 4th year when Nexus acquired Legal Metrics, a smaller competitor with complementary technology that enhanced our core product's capabilities while eliminating a potential market rival. This strategic acquisition raised our profile considerably within the industry, generating attention from major law firms, corporate legal departments, and government agencies seeking to modernize their document management systems. By our 5th anniversary, Nexus Solutions employed over 200 people across 4 offices nationwide, with an impressive client roster including 7 of the 10 largest law firms in the country, dozens of Fortune 500 corporate legal departments, and several federal agencies operating under non-disclosure agreements. Throughout this period of extraordinary professional growth, my family continued their pattern of occasional concerned messages wondering when I would get serious about my future, entirely unaware that I now led executive meetings in boardrooms with panoramic views of Boston Harbor, made decisions affecting hundreds of employees' livelihoods, and regularly declined speaking engagements at prestigious universities due to scheduling constraints. The company's continued expansion necessitated moving our headquarters to a modern glass and steel building in downtown Boston, where my corner office afforded views of the very neighborhood where my parents lived, blissfully unaware that their supposedly directionless daughter operated a thriving enterprise just miles from their doorstep. By our 7th year, Nexus Solutions had grown to over 300 employees with a valuation exceeding $300 million, with my ownership stake now representing more wealth than the combined lifetime earnings of everyone at my family's annual barbecue. The company's reputation for innovation and excellence had become firmly established within the legal technology sector, with industry publications regularly featuring our case studies and client success stories. Multiple acquisition offers from larger tech companies arrived with increasing frequency and escalating valuations, all of which I politely declined, preferring to maintain control of the company's direction and culture rather than cashing out prematurely. Through all this growth and success, I maintained the boundary between my professional achievements and my family's awareness, not from fear of their reaction, but from a gradually developing realization that their validation had become irrelevant to my sense of accomplishment or personal worth. The separation had evolved from a defensive mechanism into a fascinating social experiment. How long could parallel realities exist before inevitably colliding? That question would soon be answered when my sister walked through Nexus Solutions' front doors for her interview. The contrast between my family's perception and my actual circumstances hit me with renewed force as I entered my penthouse apartment overlooking the Charles River that evening after the barbecue, kicking off the deliberately scuffed flats I'd worn to maintain appearances and stepping onto the cool marble floor of my entryway. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured Boston's glittering skyline while the sophisticated home automation system sensed my arrival, gradually illuminating the space and activating the built-in sound system to play a soothing jazz playlist. Shrugging off the clearance rack sundress that had served as part of my disguise, I changed into silk loungewear and poured myself 2 fingers of 18-year-old Macallan, a small reward for enduring 3 hours of thinly veiled criticism and condescension from people whose combined net worth I could exceed with a single month of my current income. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my cousin Tyler bragged about his surgical residency's 80-hour workweeks, I had negotiated healthcare contracts that would determine the quality of care for thousands of patients across multiple hospital systems. My ruminations were interrupted by a call from Thomas Blackwood, Nexus Solutions' Chief Operating Officer and the person who had been with the company almost since its inception, having joined as our 5th employee after leaving a prestigious position at Oracle. The interview schedule is finalized for tomorrow, he began without preamble, our years of collaboration eliminating the need for small talk. 8 candidates for the senior legal counsel position, including an Abigail Morgan scheduled for 10:30. Any relation? The question I'd been anticipating for weeks had finally arrived, prompting me to take a longer sip of scotch before responding. My sister, actually. She doesn't know I'm associated with Nexus. She believes I'm still finding myself in some vague tech support role. The momentary silence on the other end conveyed Thomas's surprise more effectively than words could have. That's quite a coincidence, he finally offered, diplomatic as always. Should we reschedule her with another interviewer? I'm happy to handle it personally. The offer was tempting, allowing me to avoid the imminent collision of my carefully separated worlds, but something deeper pushed me toward confronting this situation directly. No, keep the schedule as planned. I'll conduct her interview, personally. Just make sure the panel members understand this is somewhat delicate. After ending the call, professional curiosity compelled me to open my laptop and review Abigail's application materials, which had progressed through our initial screening process without my awareness or intervention. Her resume presented the expected list of achievements: Cornell undergraduate degree, Columbia Law School, 5 years at Sullivan and Cromwell handling corporate transactions, all meticulously formatted and strategically worded to maximize impact. What caught my attention, however, were several subtle exaggerations scattered throughout. A leadership role, on a case where I knew from industry contacts she had actually been a supporting associate, a claim about developing client relationships that appeared inflated based on the firm's strict hierarchical structure, and most notably, a statement about proficiency with advanced legal technology platforms that seemed dubious given her frequent comments at family gatherings about preferring traditional legal methods. These discrepancies triggered a familiar internal conflict between my professional responsibilities and family loyalty, a tension that had remained largely theoretical until now. As CEO, I maintained strict hiring standards and expected complete honesty from candidates, often rejecting otherwise qualified applicants who demonstrated ethical flexibility on their applications. As a sister, I understood Abigail's desperate desire to secure this position, especially given our parents' relentless expectations and the competitive pressure she had faced her entire life. The professional standards I had built Nexus upon demanded fairness and integrity in our hiring process, regardless of personal connections. Yet I couldn't ignore the complex family dynamics that had shaped both Abigail's choices and my own, nor could I pretend that tomorrow's revelation wouldn't drastically alter our relationship and potentially ripple through the entire family system. My deliberation was interrupted by my phone vibrating with Abigail's name on the screen. Speak of the devil, as the saying goes. Taking a deep breath, I answered with a casual, "Hey, Abby," bracing for whatever prompted this unusual direct contact from my sister, who typically communicated through occasional group texts or holiday greeting cards. "Diana, thank goodness you picked up," she began, her voice carrying that distinctive note of forced cheerfulness that appeared whenever she wanted something. "I know we haven't talked much lately, but I could really use your input on something important." The irony of her suddenly seeking my advice after years of thinly veiled condescension wasn't lost on me, but I kept my tone neutral. "What's up?" I asked, settling deeper into my leather sofa while watching a water taxi navigate the darkening river below. "It's about my interview tomorrow at Nexus Solutions." "I know you work in tech, even if it's not, executive-level stuff," she explained, the qualification ensuring I remembered my place in her perception of the professional hierarchy. "I thought you might have some insights about what tech companies look for, especially one as innovative as Nexus. Any advice would be really helpful." The conversation that followed bordered on surreal as Abigail alternated between seeking genuine advice about the interview and offering condescending career guidance for my own situation. "After I secure this position, I could probably put in a good word for you," she offered magnanimously. "They must need people in IT support or administrative roles. It could be a fresh start for you, a real company with benefits and everything." I murmured noncommittal thanks, while suppressing the urge to mention that I had personally designed the comprehensive benefits package she was so excited about potentially receiving. "You know, Diana," she continued, her voice taking on the familiar lecturing tone I'd endured at countless family gatherings, "it's never too late to get your life together. Look at me. I've followed a clear path, made strategic choices, and now I'm being considered for a senior position at one of the most innovative companies in legal tech. You could turn things around too with some structure and focus." The temptation to reveal everything in that moment was nearly overwhelming, but I recognized it as an impulse driven more by petty satisfaction than constructive purpose. Instead, I offered genuinely useful interview advice stripped of any hints about my actual role. Prepare specific examples of problem solving, research the company's recent projects, and demonstrate authentic interest in legal technology's future. After ending the call with Abigail, I spent much of the night weighing various approaches to tomorrow's inevitable confrontation, considering outcomes ranging from vindictive revelation, immediately disqualifying her for the misleading resume, to quiet intervention, recusing myself and ensuring she got the position regardless of qualifications. By morning, having slept fitfully between bouts of ethical wrestling, I arrived at a decision that honored both my professional responsibilities and the complicated love I still maintained for my family despite years of misunderstanding and judgment. I would handle the situation with complete transparency and integrity, allowing Abigail to be evaluated on her actual merits while no longer hiding my own achievements or enabling family fiction. The morning brought uncharacteristic butterflies to my stomach as I dressed in my standard work attire, a tailored charcoal suit, ivory silk blouse, and the subtle diamond studs that had been my first significant purchase after Nexus secured its series of funding. My driver, Michael, sensed my unusual tension during our morning commute. "Everything all right, Ms. Winters?" he inquired, using my professional surname with the practiced discretion that characterized our 5-year working relationship. "Family matters intersecting with work today," I replied vaguely, watching Boston's morning bustle through tinted windows. "Could be complicated." Michael nodded sagely in the rearview mirror. "Those are always the trickiest situations. Best of luck sorting it out." If only he knew the full magnitude of what sorting it out would entail. I arrived at Nexus headquarters 30 minutes earlier than usual, the gleaming 32-story building's facade reflecting the morning sunlight across the harbor. Security staff and receptionists greeted me with their usual respectful "Good morning, Ms. Winters," as I crossed the marble-floored lobby toward the private elevator that accessed executive floors. Reaching my corner office on the 30th floor, I found Thomas waiting with a leather portfolio containing candidate profiles for today's interviews, his punctuality reflecting the military background he rarely discussed, but that informed his meticulous approach to operations. "I've briefed the interview panel about the unusual circumstances with Ms. Morgan," he confirmed, maintaining professional terminology rather than calling her my sister. They understand the sensitivity, but will evaluate her objectively against our standard criteria. Her technical assessment is scheduled before your interview segment. I nodded appreciation for his discretion. And the panel members? Thomas consulted his notes, though I suspected he had memorized the details. Veronica from legal, Raj from engineering, and Sophia from human resources, our standard cross-functional team. They've been instructed to proceed normally and allow you to handle any personal aspects that might arise. The morning progressed with practiced efficiency as we conducted 3 interviews before Abigail's scheduled appearance, each candidate bringing impressive credentials and thoughtful responses to our standard questioning protocol. During a brief break, I received a text notification that Abigail had checked in with reception downstairs, triggering a fresh wave of anticipation. Through the glass wall of our conference room, I watched the elevator doors open precisely at 10:25, revealing my sister stepping confidently into the executive floor lobby, dressed in an aggressively formal navy suit that appeared slightly too structured for our company's more contemporary culture. The receptionist directed her to the waiting area with a gesture that unintentionally pointed in my direction, causing Abigail's gaze to sweep across the glass-walled conference room where I stood reviewing notes. Her eyes passed over me initially, then snapped back with comic double-take precision, her practiced interview smile faltering momentarily before reasserting itself with visible effort. The mixture of confusion and disbelief that transformed her features confirmed she hadn't simply failed to mention knowing about my role. She was genuinely encountering this information for the first time. I maintained neutral professionalism as I approached the reception area, extending my hand formally. Ms. Morgan, thank you for coming in today. I'm Diana Winters, CEO of Nexus Solutions. Please follow me to the conference room. Abigail's hand felt cold and limp in mine, her cognitive dissonance almost palpable as she struggled to reconcile the sister she had dismissed as directionless with the executive now controlling her professional fate. Diana? You work here? She finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. You're with reception? The assumption that I must be in an administrative role despite my introduction spoke volumes about the depth of her perception. I founded Nexus Solutions 7 years ago and have served as Chief Executive Officer since its inception, I clarified matter-of-factly, leading her toward our conference room where 3 curious panel members awaited, clearly sensing unusual dynamics despite their professional composure. We'll be conducting your interview with our standard panel approach. Please take a seat. The 90 minutes that followed ranked among the most surreal professional experiences of my career, watching my typically poised and articulate sister struggle through standard interview questions while periodically darting bewildered glances in my direction. Her responses became increasingly disjointed as she attempted to reconcile her prepared interview strategy with the shocking reality of her audience. When Raj inquired about her experience with technology platforms similar to our core product, Abigail's claim to extensive familiarity crumbled under basic follow-up questions that revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of our system's functionality. Veronica's probing about complex legal scenarios yielded similarly superficial responses that might impress non-lawyers but failed to demonstrate the depth required for our senior counsel position. By the time we reached Sophia's behavioral questions about managing professional challenges, Abigail had visibly abandoned her rehearsed responses, instead answering with uncharacteristic authenticity about struggling with work-life balance and feeling perpetually inadequate despite outward achievements. After the panel members excused themselves, leaving us alone in the conference room with its panoramic harbor views, the carefully constructed facade between my family and professional identities finally dissolved completely. I don't understand, Abigail began, her voice unsteady. You're actually running this entire company? The same company featured in the Wall Street Journal last month? I nodded, allowing her the space to process this revelation at her own pace. Why didn't you ever tell any of us? Why would you let Mom and Dad think you were? She trailed off, apparently unable to verbalize the family's collective assumption about my circumstances. Failing? Struggling? Lost, I supplied calmly. Because their definition of success never aligned with my vision, and at some point, I stopped needing their validation to measure my own worth. Abigail's expressions cycled rapidly through disbelief, anger, embarrassment, and finally settling into something resembling panic. So yesterday, when everyone was talking about how directionless you are and I announced my interview here, you already knew that I'd be conducting your interview? Yes. The implications of this sequence appeared to hit her with physical force, her shoulders slumping as color drained from her face. God, I even called to give you career advice. Offered to help you get an entry-level position. A hysterical edge crept into her voice. This is humiliating. Rather than responding immediately, I walked to the office kitchenette and returned with 2 glasses of water, placing one before my visibly distressed sister. Abigail, I didn't orchestrate this situation to embarrass you. You applied through normal channels, were screened by our HR team based on your qualifications, and progressed to interviews without any intervention from me. Taking the seat beside rather than across from her, I continued more gently. What troubles me isn't that you didn't know about my position. That was my choice to keep private. It's that your application contains several claims that don't align with the reality of your experience. The directness of this observation caused her to flinch slightly before her legal training reasserted itself. I may have emphasized certain aspects of my experience to highlight relevant skills. She began defensively before abruptly stopping herself. Something unexpected happened then. Abigail's carefully cultivated professional mask crumbled entirely as tears formed in her eyes. Do you have any idea what it's like? She asked quietly. Being the successful daughter that mom and dad parade around? The expectations never stop increasing. Cornell wasn't good enough. It should have been Harvard. Making law review wasn't enough. I should have been editor. Every achievement just raises the bar for the next impossible standard. This raw vulnerability from my perpetually composed sister caught me completely off guard. Each family gathering, I have to arrive with some new accomplishment, some evidence that their investment in me is paying off, she continued, wiping tears with uncharacteristic disregard for her makeup. When I heard about this position at Nexus, it seemed perfect, prestigious enough to satisfy them, challenging enough to actually engage me. I've been miserable at Sullivan and Cromwell for years, but quitting without something better wasn't an option. The revelation of Abigail's private struggles beneath her seemingly perfect adherence to our parents' expectations shifted something fundamental in my perception of our family dynamics. The golden child and the disappointment suddenly appeared as 2 sides of the same damaged coin, both responding to parental conditional love, just with different coping mechanisms. I had no idea, I admitted, reaching across the conference table to squeeze her hand briefly. From the outside, you always seemed completely aligned with their vision, thriving under the same expectations that felt suffocating to me. Abigail gave a hollow laugh. That's what makes this so ironically perfect. You escaped their expectations and built something extraordinary on your own terms. I followed their blueprint exactly and ended up miserable, faking qualifications for a job interview at my rebellious sister's company. The absurdity of the situation finally broke through the tension, causing us both to laugh with a genuineness I couldn't remember sharing with my sister since childhood. As our conversation shifted toward more honest territory than we'd explored in decades, the superficial sibling rivalry imposed by parental expectations began dissolving, replaced by tentative recognition of shared experiences viewed through different lenses. The emergency family dinner orchestrated by Abigail that evening brought me back to my parents' colonial-style home in Beacon Hill for the second time in 48 hours, a frequency unprecedented in recent years. My mother's confusion was evident when she opened the door to find me standing beside Abigail, both of us arriving in the same vehicle rather than separately, as would have been expected given our historically distant relationship. "Diana, I didn't realize you were joining us," she remarked with poorly disguised surprise, her gaze flicking between my business attire and Abigail's uncharacteristically subdued expression. Abigail mentioned needing to discuss something important, but didn't specify. "This concerns all of us," Abigail interjected with unusual assertiveness, guiding me into the formal dining room where our father already sat reviewing documents at his customary place at the head of the table. Robert Morgan glanced up with mild irritation at the interruption, his reading glasses perched low on his nose, before registering my unexpected presence.
"Diana,
Is everything all right? The automatic assumption that my appearance at an unscheduled family gathering must indicate some personal crisis spoke volumes about their perception of my life stability. Before I could respond, Abigail took control of the narrative. Mom, Dad, we need to have an honest conversation about something important. It's about my interview today. My mother brightened immediately, interpreting this as good news about the position we'd heard so much about at yesterday's barbecue. Did they offer you the job already? I told your father they would recognize your qualifications immediately. Her enthusiasm dimmed slightly as she noticed Abigail's lack of celebratory energy. What happened, sweetheart? Did something go wrong? My sister took a steadying breath before continuing. The interview went differently than expected. I discovered something significant about Nexus Solutions that none of us knew. She paused, glancing at me with a silent request to take over the revelation. I founded Nexus Solutions 7 years ago when I left law school. I stated simply, watching their expressions shift from confusion to disbelief. I've been serving as CEO since its inception. The company currently employs over 300 people nationwide and was valued at $312 million during our last funding round. The stunned silence that followed stretched uncomfortably until my father broke it with characteristic skepticism. That's impossible. We would have known something like that. My mother's reaction proved more immediately practical. Nexus Solutions, she repeated slowly. Diana Winters is listed as the founder in all the articles. She reached for her phone, typing rapidly. You've been using a different name professionally? Rather than answering directly, I watched as she scrolled through search results, her eyes widening progressively as connections formed. There's a profile in Forbes from last year, she murmured, more to herself than to us. And a Wall Street Journal feature about disrupting legal technology. Her gaze lifted from the screen to study my face with newfound uncertainty. This is actually true? You really built this company? My father had retrieved his own laptop, conducting his own verification with increasing agitation. This makes no sense. Why wouldn't you tell us about this level of success? Why maintain the impression that you were struggling all these years? The genuine confusion in his voice reflected the fundamental disconnect between us, the inability to understand why his approval might not represent the ultimate validation I sought in life. Because the measure of my success isn't whether it impresses you, I replied without hostility, simply stating a realization that had crystallized over years of separation. When I left law school to pursue my vision, the family consensus was that I was making a terrible mistake. Rather than constantly defending my choices against criticism, I found it simpler to create distance. My mother's expression had transformed from disbelief to something more complex, a mixture of pride, confusion, and perhaps a tinge of regret. But you've achieved extraordinary success by any standard. Why wouldn't you want us to know about that? The question revealed the depth of her inability to separate achievement from familial approval, success from external validation. Because it was never about the achievement itself for you, I explained gently. It was about adherence to your prescribed path. If I'd become wealthy through conventional means, partner at a prestigious firm, marrying into money, even winning the lottery, you would have considered that success. Building something unconventional from scratch didn't fit the narrative you valued. While my mother processed this perspective with visible difficulty, Abigail redirected the conversation toward her own revelation. There's more to discuss about today. My interview performance was not what I had hoped. I've been so focused on maintaining the appearance of professional satisfaction and achievement that I've neglected developing genuine expertise or passion for my work. This unprecedented admission of vulnerability from the family's golden child shifted attention away from my revelation, causing both parents to focus on Abigail with concerned expressions. What are you saying, sweetheart? Our mother asked cautiously. Are you unhappy at Sullivan and Cromwell? The dam of pretense finally broke as Abigail revealed years of accumulated dissatisfaction with her carefully curated life choices. I've been miserable for years, she confessed, voice cracking slightly. I never wanted to practice corporate law. I chose it because it seemed impressive and would make you both proud. Every decision I've made since college has been calculated to earn your approval rather than pursue what actually interests me. Our father's reaction revealed volumes about the family dynamics that had shaped both our trajectories. His first instinct was defensive anger. "We've only wanted what's best for both of you," he insisted, voice rising. "Everything we've done was to ensure you had every advantage, every opportunity." My mother nodded vigorously in agreement, adding, "We pushed because we believed in your potential." How is that wrong? The familiar pattern of parental defensiveness followed by justification threatened to derail the honest conversation until I interjected with quiet firmness. "The issue isn't that you wanted us to succeed. It's that you defined success so narrowly that it left no room for our own definitions or authentic interests." This observation landed with unexpected impact, creating a momentary silence as they appeared to genuinely consider the perspective. The conversation that followed unfolded with several hours of increasingly honest exchanges about expectations, conditional approval, and the damage of measuring love through achievement. My father eventually lapsed into uncharacteristic quietness, his typical authoritative certainty replaced by reflective listening as both his daughters revealed perspectives he had never considered. My mother alternated between defensive justifications and moments of genuine insight about her role in creating the dynamics that had fractured our family connections. By the time dessert was served, largely untouched as emotional appetites overshadowed physical ones, I had established clear boundaries for future family interactions. "I'm willing to rebuild our relationship, but only on terms that respect my autonomy and life choices. Conditional approval isn't something I'm interested in earning anymore." This declaration, delivered without anger but with firm conviction, marked a fundamental shift in our family power dynamic. The evening concluded with tentative steps toward a new understanding, not instantaneous healing of decades of misalignment, but the beginning of a more authentic connection based on who we actually were rather than who our parents had expected us to become. 6 months after the revelations that transformed our family's understanding of success and achievement, the Morgan family dynamics had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. My parents' spacious home, once adorned exclusively with Abigail's accomplishments, now displayed framed articles about Nexus solutions alongside photographs from both daughters' lives, an external representation of internal changes gradually taking root. The most significant transformation occurred in my relationship with Abigail, which evolved from distant competition to genuine collaboration after she declined the position at Nexus, acknowledging honestly that her qualifications didn't match the role, and instead accepted my offer to help her explore career paths that genuinely engaged her interests. Our weekly coffee meetings became opportunities for authentic connection as she gradually uncovered a passion for educational technology that had been buried beneath years of parental expectations. "I've spent so much time trying to win a game I never actually wanted to play," she confided during one such meeting, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "Watching you present to your executive team last week was eye-opening, not because of your position or the company's success, but because of how genuinely excited you are about the work itself." This observation captured perfectly the fundamental shift in perspective she was experiencing. I established healthier boundaries with our parents while simultaneously building more authentic connections, no longer avoiding family gatherings, but approaching them with clear limits on certain topics and behaviors. When my mother slipped into old patterns, comparing my single status to Abigail's relationship, "35 is getting up there, Diana, and you're such a catch now with your company," I responded with calm directness. "Mom, we discussed how comparing your daughters doesn't foster healthy relationships. I'm happy with my life exactly as it is." These gentle but consistent corrections gradually modified behaviors that had seemed immutable for decades. My father's adjustment proved surprisingly substantial once his initial defensiveness subsided. His engineering mind approached our strained relationship as a problem to be solved, leading him to seek books on parental expectations and even attend a workshop on family dynamics, efforts that would have been unimaginable mere months earlier. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding conditional love," he acknowledged during a private conversation in his study. "It wasn't intentional, but I see now how our focus on achievements might have communicated that our approval was performance-based." This humble acknowledgement, clearly difficult for a man accustomed to certainty, opened pathways for healing that decades of argument never could have achieved. The professional consequences of our family revelations proved equally transformative. Abigail, liberated from the pressure to maintain appearances of corporate law happiness, discovered genuine enthusiasm for developing educational platforms that made legal concepts accessible to underserved communities. Her legal background, combined with newly developed technical knowledge, acquired through courses I helped her identify, positioned her uniquely in an emerging field that engaged both her analytical abilities and previously unexpressed creativity. Watching her excitement grow as she developed her first prototype educational game for high school students interested in law provided satisfaction entirely different from my business achievements. The joy of witnessing authentic passion replace performative success. My own professional trajectory expanded to include establishing a scholarship fund for unconventional entrepreneurs, particularly those pursuing non-traditional paths without family support or connections. The Diana Morgan Fellowship, using my birth name professionally for the first time, provided funding, mentorship, and networking opportunities for 10 promising innovators annually, with selection criteria emphasizing authentic vision and determination rather than prestigious credentials. Explaining this initiative during a rare joint interview with Abigail for a business publication, I shared the philosophy underlying both the fellowship and my revised approach to family relationships. Traditional metrics of success often miss the most innovative potential. The people who change industries are frequently those who question established patterns rather than perfectly following them. The healing process included professional family therapy sessions that provided structured space for addressing decades of accumulated misunderstandings and hurt feelings. These conversations occasionally became uncomfortable as buried resentment surfaced, but the skilled therapist helped us navigate toward understanding rather than assigning blame. During one particularly significant session, my mother articulated a breakthrough realization. I pushed both of you toward paths I considered secure because I grew up with such financial instability, she explained, voice thick with emotion. My father lost everything in a business failure when I was 12, and we went from comfortable to barely surviving overnight. I swore my children would never experience that fear. This contextualizing of her controlling behavior didn't excuse past wounds, but offered new compassion for their origins. The first family gathering after 6 months of this intensive healing work, a smaller, more intimate dinner rather than the performance-oriented barbecue that had triggered our confrontation, demonstrated tangible progress in our communication patterns. Conversations flowed toward genuine interest rather than achievement accounting, with questions about fulfillment and passion replacing interrogations about promotions and credentials. When my Uncle James began his usual inquiry about career advancements, my father surprised everyone by intercepting gracefully. James, we're focusing less on professional scorecards these days and more on genuine interests. Diana was just describing a fascinating new application of her company's technology in immigration law. This simple redirection represented months of internal work and shifting priorities. My mother's evolution perhaps most poignantly manifested in a private conversation on her garden terrace as autumn leaves drifted around us. I owe you an apology that's long overdue, she began, uncharacteristic vulnerability evident in her voice. I measured your worth by standards that failed to recognize your unique gifts. What you've built isn't just impressive because it's successful by conventional metrics. It's extraordinary because it represents authentic vision and perseverance. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. The genuine acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes as decades of seeking maternal validation dissolved into something more meaningful, mutual respect between adults who could now see each other clearly. By the following summer, when another family barbecue approached, the contrast with the previous year's event couldn't have been more pronounced. Rather than arriving with dread and emotional armor, I looked forward to genuine connections with relatives who now asked about my passion projects rather than relationship status or arbitrary achievements. Abigail and I arrived together, both successful by different measures, but more importantly, both pursuing paths aligned with our authentic interests rather than external expectations. The most profound transformation, however, wasn't in career trajectories or family gatherings, but in my internal relationship with success itself. The validation I had unconsciously sought even while rejecting my parents' definition of achievement gradually dissolved into something more sustainable, satisfaction derived from creation rather than recognition, from authentic expression rather than external metrics. This perspective shift represented the true liberation from family patterns, allowing appreciation for accomplishments without attachment to others' perceptions of their value. The life lesson emerging from this family transformation transcended simple narratives about following one's dreams or standing up to parental pressure. It revealed the subtle distinction between rejecting others' definitions of success and truly creating one's own, a difference between rebellion against external standards and authentic alignment with internal values. The courage required wasn't in dramatic confrontation but in quiet persistence, building something meaningful while releasing the need for validation from those who couldn't yet understand its value. As I reflect on this journey from apparent failure to recognize success to something more meaningful than either label can capture, I realize the most important freedom isn't financial independence or professional autonomy, but liberation from seeking approval as a measure of worth. The peace I discovered came not from proving my parents wrong about my choices, but from reaching a place where their opinion, whether critical or approving, no longer defined my sense of accomplishment or fulfillment. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your authentic path? How did you navigate that challenging terrain? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you found meaning in this story, and hit that like button to help others find these reflections on redefining success beyond external validation. Share with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these complex journeys is the most valuable gift we can receive. Thank you for joining me in this vulnerable sharing, and remember that true success isn't what others can see and applaud, but the alignment between your daily choices and your deepest values.